So I'm not from America, which means I did not know and I had no idea who Joe Rogan was. In 2016, I started going to the gym and I started listening to some motivational videos. When one voice comes through and it changes my whole life. At the beginning, it was just a voice, and I remember that this guy, he said some very interesting things. One of them was that if he had 100 lives, he would spend learning different things, enjoying different cultures, learning about new habits and all that. Immediately, that clicked in me something that was just discovering myself at a time, how to expand your consciousness, and the way he lays it out, it was very relatable to me. And I didn't know who he was. I just heard the voice and I kept working out, listening to it. And I remember that the voice, I wanted to keep, like, every time that a motivational video had his voice on, I would click on him. Then a year later, I started dating this girl that she was very into Joe Rogan. At the time, I didn't know who he was. I didn't know his name. I didn't know what he looked like. Just remember hearing the voice. When I go to her house one day, I listen to the voice and I look at the TV and there's this bald dude talking and I'm like, who is that? And she's like, oh, that's Joe Rogan. He's a podcaster, comedian, and I listen to his podcast and it's great. He talks about a lot of stuff. And I was just like, huh. And I remember, like, she would listen to the podcast, and I was like, man, listening 2 hours of this, I don't know, but it was very entertaining the way he would talk about spirituality, the way he would talk about working out, the way he would talk about, fighting with random dudes, being disrespected by your boss, being disrespected by the system. And I was like, man, this guy is onto something. What happened right then and there, I didn't realize it, but it was Joe Rogan reframing my wounds, you can say. When I moved to America, I was a kid full of wounds and I didn't know who I was. I just knew I needed to do some work on myself. And Joe Rogan laid it out, the template of the work. What's the most interesting thing for me is as soon as I discovered something with him, I would just, and a question mark that I had inside of me. He kind of lays it out like that. For example, I used to think that I was crazy for enjoying smoking weed and working out. You can have your opinion on this subject, okay, no problem, but it's very uncommon. And I thought I was crazy and I didn't say this to anybody, So one day, as I'm listening to the podcast, at the beginning, I didn't listen to the full podcast. I would listen to random, videos on YouTube, like, those cut-ups. And he's saying that he smoked weed and he would hit the bag and just feel different. And at the time I was listening to him saying this, my mind was clicking and clicking and clicking. And I felt myself evolving, accepting myself, parts of myself that I didn't know I didn't accept, that I was ashamed of, And then Joe Rogan is a guy who is one of the most open horizons that you can reach, I guess. Because he is not only into one thing, he's into a lot of things. He's obsessed with many, many things. And many of them was what I was obsessed with too, growing up without a dad, it's not that I grew up without a dad, but my dad, he was married to another woman, so he didn't have time to teach me basic stuff. And Joe Rogan was just like, it seemed like he read my mind, man. He was my best friend for a while, for a long time, for years. Kept listening to him. And I remember that in 2019 or 2018, I started listening to the podcast full mode, After listening to him fully, I started believing in enlightenment, consciousness, expansion. And the day came when I was leaving the gym and I'm listening to his podcast, right? This is so much of a bigger, coincidence that it cannot be a coincidence, As I'm listening to the podcast and I was going through problems in my life, of course, you're aligned, right? Like when you're aligned with your purpose, things open doors for you, right? Like that's what I remember like learning that time. So as I'm walking out of the gym and I'm listening to Joe Rogan, he's talking about like how people, the basic shit he says, like always when you go to restaurants, be nice, tip well, leave people better than when you meet them. And he's saying all these things and I'm listening to it. And then as I'm walking out, he says, hold the door open to someone when you're leaving the gym, for example. Now, he said that. The dude just, it was so much of a synchronicity, man. Because he was saying that, as he said, like, hold the door. The dude put his hand on the door as he saw me and hold it for me, And I remember just being mind-blowing by that. And that was only one of the moments that happened, because it was wild, man. I would like read a book and then next time Joe Rogan is talking about that book. What the fuck? Is there the Joe Rogan algorithm? What is it? I'm a guy who likes not hate on people, but like I'll clock you out fast if your objective and if your goal is to just be dominating and not really evolving. And I remember that with Joe Rogan, that took a long ass time. He held that crown for as long as a human being could, And he's in the opening of my book. I wrote the book, Who Would Have Thought, a Survey with PTSD Story. And the introduction of my book is, damn, I'm about to start listening to the Joe Rogan Experience when I noticed that my cat is about to eat the quails. That's the kickoff of my book. And I remember thinking, like, why am I writing about the Joe Rogan Experience? Like, nobody really listens to this, At the time, this was 2018. The real ones listened to him back then, right? Now he is the mainstream, he's the main guy. And back then, he was just, with us, the chosen ones, So, very different Joe Rogan now, but I feel like that's the point of evolution that everybody reach when you reach the pinnacle, and he did reach that. Joe Rogan is a story of authenticity, of grinding, and of expansion of consciousness that I don't think ever stopped until, maybe now, because he is very comfortable. Very rich, he worked hard for that, so he deserves to enjoy everything. And I don't know, man, like, I don't know what would be of me if I hadn't listened to him. I do stand-up comedy now, but I don't think it is because of him. But I think it was the path that I was on that got me here. Because I remember listening to him talking about, stand-up, and I was just like, oh, that is interesting. But I never thought about doing it. Until I started bartending in a bar that was literally wall-to-wall with the Funny Bone, and I had my book published at the time, and I needed to do something to promote it. And people just said to me, you can just do the open mic, man. You just have to put your name on it. I'm like, oh, really? And then as I started doing comedy, another path started opening up for me that made even Joe Rogan make even more sense. Because I knew a lot about comedians. Why? Because I listened to him, That's Joe Rogan in a nutshell, I think, for the ones that were coming up, man. He was like a father figure for us, guide us through a lot, even though, like, one thing that I remember that he would say is, like, about being disrespected. When you have someone trying to disrespect you, and he would just address it like an alpha male mind, right? And everything felt right for you when you listened to it. Joe Rogan, man. Joe fucking Rogan. If you had any experience like this, which I'm sure you have, please leave in the comments and let me know, because I would love to hear about it. Joe Rogan, he enlightened a whole generation, man. And it's funny because he was a conspiracy theorist, right? And now he is a conspiracy himself. Imagine 10 years ago if you say, like, Joe Rogan works for the CIA, you'd be like, fuck off, man, he's the real guy, he's out there, he's fighting for us. He could be elected president, I guess. But now if you say, like, oh, Joe Rogan works for the CIA, it's like, might be, right? He might be, like, with this whole thing with Peter Thiel and this whole, But it's still nice to see him going against Trump and the immigration thing, which is not very common, you know. So he keeps still punching the right bag for us. I'll see you guys next time. That was it for today.